about on the Sonority project yet is Transcription. So that was a transcription by the great trumpet player Clifford Brown. If you don't know a lot about Clifford Brown, he died when he was 26 years old, which was back in 1956. Him and the piano player Richie Powell were in the back of a car going home after a gig. Clifford's girlfriend was driving and the car went off the road, and all three of them died in an incredibly tragic accident. Not just because three young people dying in a car accident like that, but both Richie and especially Clifford, both Richie and Clifford were bright, shining stars in the local jazz community and were coming up pretty quickly in the scene. I've been transcribing Clifford Brown for probably close to 2 years now, and there are a couple of reasons behind that. Number one, obviously transcription is an incredibly important study for up-and-coming jazz musicians and for any jazz musician, frankly. We can always learn more from people who came before us. However, what I notice, a lot of students will bounce around to different artists and transcribe different artists from different records, depending on who they're listening to at the current time. And that's great because it kind of gives you a very general sense of what everybody was playing and a very general sense of the jazz language. However, I would advocate for choosing an artist and sticking with that artist for as long as you can stand it and transcribing as much of that artist as you possibly can. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna sound exactly like Clifford Brown or you're gonna sound exactly like Dexter Gordon or somebody like that. That gives you a very in-depth look at their language, how they utilize their language, and how their language fits into the bigger picture of the jazz idiom. So as I've been transcribing Clifford Brown for the last couple of years, I've probably transcribed close to, we'll say, 25 or 30 solos of his. So what's the general process after you transcribe a solo? Some people have different processes for the actual transcription, whether we'll listen along and transcribe the solo and notate it as they go. Some people will transcribe the solo along with the recording and just learn it as they go without writing it down and then write it down after the fact. Some people will just learn the solo and will never write it down. Whatever your strategy for transcribing is, you gotta make sure that you're getting something out of it. And there are a couple of things that we can get out of transcribing. Number one is style. And there are a lot of different things that fall under style. Sound, articulation, swing feel, time feel, where the player places their eighth notes in relationship to the beat. Those things all kind of fall underneath the style umbrella. And those are really important things to learn because that's how you learn how to essentially speak jazz with a dialect that people will understand. The next thing that we can get out of transcription is obviously language. And I would say that's the biggest thing for me relating to transcription is taking a Clifford Brown solo, cutting and pasting some licks from that solo, learning them in all 12 keys, and then working on applying them in tunes that I'm working on. That's probably the most important part. Something else that you can get out of transcription is if you're learning a new tune or something like that, and you want to figure out how a specific musician approaches a specific part of the tune. For instance, Dolphin Dance is a tune that I've been working on for the last week or so, and that's not the easiest tune in the world to learn. It has more or less a pretty complicated form. It has some different pedal sections that can sometimes get a little bit confusing and confuse you about where you are in the form. I've been working on how Herbie Hancock approaches a couple of the parts of the form, namely the pedal sections and how he gets in and out of those pedal sections. So those are a couple of approaches that you can take when you're transcribing. The most important concept to approach a transcription with is you want to have a goal about why you're transcribing this specific solo. Say you're transcribing really modern Chris Potter solo that's in 13/8. That's really cool and that'll probably be a good technical exercise. However, the application And the use case for anything that you might get out of that solo is going to be pretty slim. That's why I've stuck with Clifford Brown so long, and I've been able to kind of absorb a lot of the language that he plays. So that's my 2 cents on transcription. If you have any other topics that you want me to cover in this, please let me know and leave them down in the comments, and I'll throw something together. Other than that, I'll see you tomorrow.